I'm Jamil Jaffer, NSI's founder and executive director, and welcome to another special episode of Fault Lines, NSI's on-the-ground series, this time from New Hampshire, where the nation's first of the nation primaries recently took place. And like in Iowa, I was able to interview 3 New Hampshire residents for their thoughts on the national security issues and debates shaking up America in the lead up to the 2024 presidential election. However, before we get to the interviews, I'm going to let Jamie, the general manager of the historic Red Arrow Diner, give us a little bit of background about the historic place where I interviewed our guests.
All right, so Jamil Jaffer here with NSI's Fault Lines podcast. We're here in the famous Red Arrow Diner in Manchester, New Hampshire. It is Election Day in New Hampshire, the Republican primary 2024, and I'm here with Jamie. Jamie is part of the diner team, and she's going to tell us about some of the history of the diner because this is literally a historic place. So Jamie, iconic, all those things, iconic. Tell us about the diner.
Okay, 102 years ago in 1922.
Yeah.
Actually, in 1921, there was a little lunch cart out here.
Okay.
And then in 1922, the Lamontagne family built the diner. 5 owners later, Carol Lawrence in 1987 bought the diner, and we grew from there.
Talk to us about what happens. Has the diner always been the place to come for political people?
Since I've been here.
Okay.
In recent history, correct. It's always been the place to come. You can't be a president without walking through that door.
Is that right?
That's right.
That's the rule.
That is the rule.
Okay. And what happens during election season? Like, what does the dynamic of the diner change? Do the people change? Does a lot of people from out of town?
A little bit. So most of our regulars who don't want to be a part of it will avoid us for a week or two, or come very early.
How many? Do you have a lot of regulars?
A lot. Yeah.
Do they come in just for the food?
I would say not. They come in for the culture as well.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Tell me what do you mean by the culture?
So this is very different. We are tiny. So when you walk in here, we can't get away from you. You can't get away from us. We're gonna become friends. There's people here who know way too much about me, and I know way too much about them. Yeah.
and do you see people like start conversations who never met each other
all the time? You can't make it stop when you sit at the counter.
Yeah.
It's like you're sitting at a bar without alcohol, but everybody's friends.
Do people get in arguments?
Sometimes, but usually it's kept casual.
Okay.
Usually it's kept casual. There's been some arguments, but they usually don't escalate.
And do people talk politics when politics is not in season at your counter?
All the time.
Even when it's on season?
Even when it's not in season.
So politics is on.
Politics is always on the menu here.
All right. Okay. And when it's in season, does the conversation change when it's about politics? Or do you hear less of it because people don't want to talk about it?
So this go around, it depends. So it depends. We will have a wave of all media coming to eat, and nobody's talking politics.
Because they don't want to get covered?
They're done.
Oh, they're done.
Done. They're on break. They're done. But then when the next wave comes, that's all you hear. Yeah.
So when it's politics season, is it like campaign volunteers? Is it candidates? Is it, you mentioned media. Is it like, who is it that comes through?
Everybody. Everybody. You wouldn't even believe it. So this go around, including all the people that have dropped out, the only person I haven't met is Pence.
Really?
That's it.
Wow.
Yeah.
All of them.
Every single one.
Including like the sort of the random candidates nobody's ever heard of?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Like when it started February 2023, Vivek Ramaswamy announced his candidacy and then came here.
Right. So you don't have to tell me if you don't want to, but like, so I have an impression of him.
Okay.
What's your impression of him?
My impressions of all the politicians stay within my diner thing.
It's part
and
of the
he
code.
was great. He loved the food.
That's all that matters.
Yeah.
Jamie, thanks for doing this. Really appreciate it. Thanks for having me in the Red Arrow. This is
Yeah.
amazing. Great place to do my interviews for the podcast. So thank you for letting me do it. Appreciate it.
Of course.
Now that we know more about the iconic location that politicos hang out in New Hampshire and where we recorded our interviews, it's now time for my past self to introduce our interviewees.
All right. So, Jamil Jaffer here with NSI's Fault Lines podcast. We're doing our man on the street interviews, Manchester, New Hampshire. It's the day of the Republican presidential primaries in New Hampshire. There's a lot of election stuff going on. We are at the famous Red Arrow Diner in Manchester, the place where all the politicians come. I'm here today with Nick, who's here to talk to us about national security. So, Nick, tell me about yourself. Where are you from? What are you doing here? Tell me about your life.
Yeah, so I'm Nick. I am from Cape Cod, Massachusetts originally. I've lived in New Hampshire the last 8 years. I've recently moved to Manchester. This is my first time actually in the Red Arrow Diner as well.
Wow.
I had to get a piece of pie. I'm a software engineer, and I've worked in privacy for the last several years, and before that e-commerce and other various things, and I'm 33 years old.
I'm here with Tabitha, and Tabitha's going to talk to us a little about national security. Tabitha, tell us about yourself.
Born and raised here in Manchester, my whole life, 47 years. Mom of 2 kids, in their 20s. Worked for the state for like almost 20 years.
I'm here with Jamie. Jamie, tell us a little about yourself.
I am a lifelong New Hampshire resident. I have voted every year since I was 18.
Amazing.
And
Love that.
the general manager at Red Arrow Diner.
And so tell us, how much, as you think about voting, it's election day, how much do you think about national security? How much does that affect your vote, if at all?
A little bit. Our son is in the National Guard, so, and I have family members who've been in the service, so, it's always in the back of your mind, like, are they going to get deployed or hurt?
Well, thank you to your son for service and your family members.
Maybe to an extent. I probably don't think about them the way that I should. And I'm probably not up to date the way that I should be.
So, they obviously affect my vote to some degree, right? Certain policies and things of that nature, and like I've kind of disassociated myself from like standard just getting messages all day, watching the news. I tried to actually really not pay attention that much, whether it's like intentional researching, whether it's through like YouTube channels or certain websites. Like obviously to mind like the border crisis comes up and then the litany of wars going around the world. And like often politicians will say a lot of different things about this or that, but I tend to not really focus too much on those things a lot of times when it comes to like picking my particular vote at this moment.
So you mentioned you disassociate yourself from the normal media and you do sort of your own research, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, and like, what are the sources you look to for that information? Is it TikTok? Mentioned YouTube? Are there particular channels? And where do you go for your news?
So like I've really been more into like human rights type of I've really been focusing honestly not that much on international news, on domestic news, so much in the U.S. And there's actually a YouTube channel called Channel 5 that I really like, and it kind of explores a lot of like the hardships going on in the United States, where there's the borders crisis or a lot of the fentanyl crises and huge homeless population stuff we have all over the country, even as you can probably see here in Manchester. And those are a lot of things that I've really been focused on. So much stuff. I won't say like the foreign policy stuff is above my pay grade. I'm really into like privacy law and a lot of that type of policy that's going around the world as like other people are being violated and data has been collected and just exploited every single day. But like, obviously I can't help but see like normal news on TV every now and then. Like there's certain websites and things too, and I'll read everything from, extreme right-wing to extreme left-wing stuff to kind of just get in between and really take an autonomous look at things.
As you think about these national security issues, what do you see as the biggest threat to the United States coming from the outside?
Russia combining with China. I think like we're on the cusp of the World War III. So I just watched the documentary on Netflix about on the front lines with World War II, and it was scary to see these actual footage of people getting killed. And it just brought you back to okay, maybe this is what's happening now. Even though it's not over on our U.S. territory, but this is what's happening to people in Israel, Iran, and Russia, and Ukraine. It's sad.
I think we all think about China and Russia and nuclear weapons and are they pointed at us? We think about that stuff all the time, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably the border. It's probably the drugs coming in through the southern border. And it's most likely, all the smuggling of fentanyl and things of that nature. They're getting brought up, or xylazine. They're getting brought up through Mexican cartels through the border, through people coming from, refugee countries that are being paid to bring things in and then ultimately brought up to the cities and like distributed to the rest of our country. Yes, like there's major wars going on in the world all through Africa, Eastern Europe obviously, and I'm sure there's another bunch of various ones that I'm not even touching on, but like in my opinion, you know, our national security really is, you know, it's kind of being, the Americans are dying from drugs.
So talking about Russia, you know, there's this war going on in Ukraine. We've been backing the Ukrainians. Do you think we should do more of that? Should we be backing the Ukrainians? What should we be doing on that in that situation?
So I think I should be a little more educated on that to talk more about it, because I'm not exactly sure how Ukraine feels about what we're doing. You know?
Mm-hmm.
It's hard because you want to help your other countries, but then we need to take care of people that are here first. We're sending billions of dollars over there, but what are they? You don't see any improvement. If we're sending people money, we should see something happen, and nothing's happening.
So I think we've given them quite a bit of money. We've done a lot of humanitarian acts on the ground. You know, I think obviously the U.S. opposes the Russian influence going into the war in Ukraine. Like, I don't really know a lot about it. You know, too much about the history of Ukraine and Russia. You know, and everything that happened, you know, 10 years ago with Crimea and all that sort of thing. I mean, it's very complex, right? And like, I think that we should, you know, if the UN itself and the US being a part of that can continue to support maybe humanitarian efforts and like relieving people and make sure no one's starving to death, that'd be a great influence. As far as providing military weapons going forward, I don't think that's the best use of US money and policy.
There's also a war in the Middle East. There was a terrorist attack against Israel. Israel responded now, and there's a war going on.
Yeah.
Should we be doing more to help Israel, less? What about the Palestinians?
It's another thing. It's tough to say. Like, do we go over there to help them, or do we wait until the civilian side of it is like, how do we help them?
You know, I don't really want to touch that topic too much, but what I will say is that it's horrible what's going on. You know, I think that the people of Israel suffered greatly in that terrorist attack from Hamas, and now, unfortunately, the people of Palestine that might not be associated with Hamas are paying dearly for the crimes of other people.
That's another one that I should be more up on to talk about, honestly.
You know, there's been talk about China potentially threatening Taiwan.
Yes.
If China were to invade Taiwan, should we defend the Taiwanese? Should we support them? Should we send them weapons?
We should probably continue doing what we've been doing with all the other countries that we've been, just send them a little bit of aid that we can.
So, you know, I think that's an interesting topic. Actually, you don't hear a lot about because Taiwan is one of the mass producers of major commodities, semiconductors, and things like that in the world, and like that's a very important island, you know, as far as like global economy goes right now, especially in technology. And you know, I think that the history between Taiwan and China is also incredibly complex, right? And like, I'm not you know, a global politics master or anything like that, but I also don't believe it's the U.S.'s place to support the invasion of China, tried to invade Taiwan and take it back. You know, I think the U.S. has a lot of very serious crises here in the United States that they really should focus their policies on. I think they should be there for support and whatever agreements they have to support them. But to spend billions or trillions of dollars on other countries' wars right now, when we're repairing after a 20-plus year war in the Middle East, and have major crises here that need to be kind of addressed, that should be really our focus. Obviously, you know, I don't want to see any more people die from senseless wars or whatever, but like, if we support Taiwan's rights to be a free country, I mean, we should obviously back them to some degree, but to like put American troops on the ground or fund them with like trillions of dollars of military aid, I don't think is our best approach.
That's where I got like iffy, because it feels like we support a country and then pull out and it goes right back to where it was a lot of the times, and wasting our own resources seems crazy to me.
I feel like you have a reason for saying that. Do you have a couple of examples in mind? I feel like you might have an example or two maybe in mind. I bet I know what they are, but...
Well, as I said, my husband is a veteran and has had a deployment, and I feel like it's upsetting to a lot of veterans that were in Afghanistan and Iraq that now it's like what they did was nothing. And a lot of the times they did a lot of good, but we're only reporting the bad that's happening.
So, do you feel like the situation in Afghanistan and Iraq, is it because we've left that it's gone backwards, or should we have stayed? Was it the way we left, or is it something else? Or should we just never have gone in?
I really wish that I had the answer that feels right to me, but I don't. I think the way that we left was a little too quick. Like, just grab up and go. But other than that, I wish I had an answer that would even make me happy.
You mentioned your husband and his colleagues that served, in particular in Afghanistan. I think you're probably talking about the Afghanistan withdrawal.
Yeah.
Tell us about sort of the people in the military's reaction, or military families' reaction to the way we left, because I sense that you had a reaction.
Yeah, that it was like, why are we just letting them take back over? It's just the Taliban's back, and after all the friends that were lost in there, was very upsetting for that to happen.
Do you worry about Iran? I mean, Iran's been in the news a lot. Do you worry about Iran, the Red Sea, all the stuff going on with the ships? Any of that worry you?
I don't really.
Yeah.
I actually worry more about like Iran and other countries like that, probably with cyber warfare and things of that nature, and like that's kind of more where I often think of. A lot of times, like, people get so influenced nowadays from psyop type of algorithms that they're not even really sure they're seeing. We've all been exposed to them, and those are the things that I actually would worry about more. Obviously, blockade of oil or like potential nuclear threats for Iran has been like on the table probably for like 40 or 50 years. So not necessarily. I mean, I think there's more fear that Iran would help back Gaza and the Hamas and cause an all-out like real serious war in Israel, which then I feel the U.S. would probably feel pretty obligated to get involved in and put American troops on the ground. That's my more fear with Iran.
I do to a certain point, but not to the point where I'm like, they're going to make it over here. They don't have like that strength, in my eye, is how I feel. I worry more about China and Russia coming over here.
You do?
Yeah.
And do you worry about like potentially them attacking the land of the U.S., or do you mean with missiles and the like?
Yeah, I think, that's what I feel. We don't have a strong president at the moment, so when they see us as weak, that's why you're seeing all this stuff. This is just how I feel. You're seeing a lot more of this because, okay, we have a weak president, and let's go over there. Now let's try to attack all these little countries, because what's the United States going to do? Oh, they'll just give us money. The little countries' money, they're not going to get involved.
It's interesting you mentioned the term being weak. Do you think that when the U.S. is weak that we are more vulnerable as a result?
Yeah.
And do you feel like we've been weak for a long time? Is that a recent development?
I think probably in the last 10 years we've become weak.
How long?
Probably 10 years.
10 years.
Yeah.
And what should we be doing about that?
We shouldn't be just laying on our backs and just taking it. We should stand up to those countries. So if we're going to get involved, we should just get involved. Which is going to force me World War III, which a lot of people don't want. But then you got to think about what might happen here in the United States, and that's always in the back of my mind. What's going to happen to us? Alaska's not far from Russia. We've got Alaska, and that's a beautiful piece of land that we have. Hawaii is not far from that whole border around there. Something could happen. I mean, there have been testing missiles. It's going to happen.
Do you think it creates more risk for the United States when we're perceived as not strong?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think we're spending enough on the military?
I think we're spending a lot on the military, but I don't think it's being allocated correctly all the time. And I don't think that we are spending enough on veterans and veteran care. It's a rough time to have a friend who's needs help, and it's a 3-month wait. That's hard.
No.
You think we should spend more?
Yes.
What about our veterans?
Well, we definitely should spend more on our veterans. You see homeless veterans out in the streets. It's sad. But I mean, we spend money on, you know, a lot of people that are coming over the border illegally. Well, they get all kinds of food stamps. They get all these benefits. You come here and you get all this stuff. But then the people that have been here for years and have served our country, they're struggling, and that's not right.
Well, I think that we probably spend the right amount in some ways, but I think that we probably need to restructure the way that we spend some of that money on the military, you know, especially with so much technology emerging, you know, and wars become so different that it's not necessarily about the boots, it's more about the technology, but all those things cost a lot of money, you know. When you have, like, I don't know the average cost of things, but like Black Hawk helicopters or drones that cost, you know, $50 to $250 million a piece, and you're building several hundred of them, it's a huge budget. And a lot of that money could be used elsewhere for different purposes.
Do you feel like we're falling behind China in technology? Or...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What can we do about it?
And, you know, we're also like maybe a little too much technology happening, right? Where I could replace the cooks with robots, and now where are those jobs at, you know?
I don't really worry about that. You know, I don't think we're necessarily falling behind. It's hard to scale what falling behind actually is. I know, like, let's just say, for instance, a country like China has privacy laws. It has the Great Red Wall, right? Their internet actually works really well with the transparency, but there is very little privacy. There's a lot of biometric data that gets collected in China, from what I know, things of that nature. I mean, we have fallen behind in the sense of, like, you know, they have a lot more people who are educated in the field of technology and that are able to produce hardware as well as software, where the United States doesn't necessarily have that ability anymore. They have a lot of software development, not so much hardware development. And like that's where we start to lose the battle a little bit in the ground. And with AI coming to market, I don't think we really understand as humans like the implications that could have. I think it's kind of like man finding fire, and we've just found fire.
Do you think it's going to be transformative or potentially destroy civilization?
Both.
Interesting.
Right?
You going to say a little more?
I think we need to focus on AI governance and how it works. As like a software engineer, my job will be replaced in the next 5 years by AI, right? So I have to focus elsewhere on what that really means. And to me, that means like learning how to govern AI, how to focus on cybersecurity and dev operations, necessarily empower AI to build certain stacks and then operate it as so, right? I think it will change the world in the medical field, a lot of like manufacturing, but it'll also affect like huge amounts of people that do jobs currently, you know, and we have to think about what that looks like. I mean, there's obviously been like major strikes with writers and all different types of authors and artists and things of that nature, and that's what scares people, but that's not necessarily, going back to foreign policy, weaponized AI could be very dangerous as well, and like it's not necessarily what we think of like robots or something like cyber cops. It's like, you know, can a drone operate independently and make autonomous decisions, right? And those type of things.
Last question. Anything else that we missed that we should talk about in sort of the national security, foreign policy, international space that we didn't talk about?
I think we should really be focused on like civilian privacy around the world, you know, and like the idea that the government and a lot of corporations have been profiting off people for decades now on just collecting so much information. And like as a U.S. citizen, I often feel like we're losing a lot of our privacy and individuality because of things that the government are passing. We haven't really been focused on privacy acts, and particularly like children that are coming up now are incredibly vulnerable to that in the future. And like as all these wars we're talking about progress and the world starts to change, you know, it's very possible that people will only have like real privacy for 5 minutes as like parents and everyone else continue to expose them online. And you know, I think we can't really predict what foreign policy will look like in the future. It could be so influenced by technology, and you know, I just hope for the best for everyone.
And that's a wrap. A huge thanks to our guests Jamie, Nick, and Tabitha for taking time out of their busy days to participate in our interviews. And another thanks to Devlin Burney, Claude Jennings, and the NSI staff for the help in producing today's episode. Tune in on Friday, February 2nd for the Fault Line team's reactions to the answers to these interviews. Fault Lines is now on YouTube, so please check out the videos of all of our interviewees and this episode. And if you like what you see or what you heard on podcast, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe.